if you think you've heard every twisted family betrayal story out there, I promise you what I'm about to tell you will shake you to your core. My name is Dorothy Johnson. I'm 73 years old, and the man I welcomed into my family, the man who married my daughter and called me Mama, just committed the most vicious, calculated crime against my 16-year-old granddaughter that I've ever witnessed in my entire life. Before I get into this nightmare, hit that subscribe button because this channel, Vintage Vengeance, is where elderly folks like me come to expose the snakes hiding in our own families. Ring that notification bell because you do not want to miss how this story ends. Trust me, what I did to Darius will have you jumping out of your seat. That violin, that beautiful, priceless Italian violin from the 1920s wasn't just some instrument you pick up at a music store. That violin traveled through my family's bloodline for over 150 years. It belonged to my grandmother, Esther Mae Johnson, the granddaughter of freed slaves who survived some of the darkest chapters of American history. When black folks couldn't even drink from the same water fountain as white people, my grandmother was playing that violin in church basements and secret gatherings, keeping our culture alive when this country wanted us erased. That violin survived the Great Migration when our family fled the terror of the South and settled in Chicago. It survived the Depression, survived riots, survived every attempt to break our spirits. My grandmother passed it to my mother, Catherine. My mother passed it to me. And when my precious granddaughter Aria turned 12 and picked up that violin for the first time, I watched her eyes light up like the heavens opened. That child had a gift, a genuine God-given talent that brought tears to my eyes. By age 16, Aria was the star of her performing arts high school. Teachers said they'd never seen raw talent like hers. Juilliard scouts were already circling. That violin wasn't just an instrument to her. It was her identity, her connection to every strong black woman who came before her, her ticket to a future that our ancestors died, hoping we'd one day have access to. My daughter Jasmine married Darius Mitchell 6 years ago. I'm going to be honest with you right now. I never trusted that man. Something about his eyes, the way he looked at things in my house like he was calculating their worth. He worked in corporate finance, drove a Mercedes, wore expensive suits, always talking about wealth building and investments. My daughter thought she'd hit the jackpot. I thought she'd married a con artist. Jasmine would get so angry when I questioned him. "Mama, you're too suspicious," she'd say. "You need to give Darius a chance. He's good to me. He's good to Aria." But a mother knows. A grandmother knows. I'd catch him taking pictures of my mother's jewelry collection. I'd see him researching auction houses on his phone during family dinners. When he asked me one Sunday, real casual-like, if I'd ever had that violin appraised, every alarm bell in my soul started ringing. "Why do you need to know that, Darius?" I asked him, looking him dead in the eyes. He smiled that slick smile of his and said, "Just curious, Mama, ... That's a piece of history. You should make sure it's properly insured." I should have thrown him out of my house right then and there. 3 months ago, everything I feared came crashing down in the most devastating way possible. It was a Saturday evening around 8 p.m. Aria had been at her best friend Shanice's birthday party across town. My daughter and Darius had driven her there earlier that afternoon. When Jasmine picked her up and brought her home, I was in my living room watching TV when I heard the most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard in my life. I ran upstairs faster than a 73-year-old woman should be able to move. Aria was standing in her bedroom doorway, her whole body shaking, her hand covering her mouth. Her room looked like a tornado hit it. Drawers pulled open, clothes thrown everywhere, her desk ransacked, her closet torn apart, and the violin case sitting wide open on her bed, completely empty. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Grandma, it's gone. It's gone. Someone took it. Someone took my violin. That child collapsed right there in the hallway, just crumpled to the floor like her strings had been cut. I held her while she sobbed, her whole body convulsing with grief. You understand what I'm telling you? This wasn't about losing an expensive object. This was watching a piece of your soul get ripped away. That violin was Aria's past, present, and future, all wrapped into one. Jasmine called the police while I held my grandbaby. Darius showed up about 20 minutes later, said he'd been at the gym. I watched that man walk into that room, look at the chaos, look at Aria sobbing on the floor, and I swear before God, I saw something flicker across his face. Not shock, not sympathy, guilt. But it was gone so fast, I thought maybe grief was making me see things that weren't there. Darius put his hand on Jasmine's shoulder and said all the right things. We'll find it, baby. We'll get it back. Don't worry. He even knelt down next to Aria and told her, Sweetheart, I promise you we're going to fix this. Looking back now, the absolute nerve of that lying, scheming, backstabbing thief makes me want to lose my religion. The police came, took statements, dusted for fingerprints, took photos. You know how that story goes when black folks call the cops about crimes in our own neighborhood. They wrote everything down real nice, gave us a case number, and basically told us not to hold our breath. These things rarely turn up, the officer said. Best thing you can do is file an insurance claim. Insurance claim. Like you could replace 150 years of family history with a check. For 2 weeks, Aria barely spoke. She stopped eating properly, stopped going to orchestra practice. Her teachers called, asking what was wrong. How do you explain to a 16-year-old that the world can be so cruel, that people can be so evil, that someone would steal the one thing that mattered most to her? And Darius? That man played his role perfectly. He helped make flyers. He posted on social media asking people to keep an eye out. He even offered to buy Aria a new violin, some factory-made student instrument that couldn't hold a candle to what she'd lost. It won't be the same, he told her, playing the caring stepfather. But at least you can keep playing while we search for yours. I watched my granddaughter's face when he said that. She just nodded, tears running down her cheeks, not even bothering to wipe them away anymore. What we didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Darius had already sold that violin 2 days after he stole it. That man looked his stepdaughter in the eyes, watched her heart break into a million pieces, and knew exactly where that violin was and how much money was sitting in his secret bank account. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because the way I found out the truth, that's when this story goes from heartbreaking to absolutely diabolical. Stay with me. You're not ready for what comes next. 2.5 weeks after the violin disappeared, I was sitting in my kitchen drinking my morning coffee when my phone rang. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but something told me to answer it anyway. Mrs. Johnson, a woman's voice said, "This is Rebecca Steinberg. We spoke about 4 years ago regarding an insurance appraisal for a vintage Italian violin." My heart started pounding. "Yes, I remember you. You're the instrument appraiser." "That's right," she said. "Mrs. Johnson, I'm calling because something very unusual crossed my desk yesterday, and I felt obligated to reach out to you. A violin matching the exact description, serial number, and provenance of the instrument you had me appraise was just sold through Whitmore Auctions in Manhattan. I happened to see the listing because I consult for them on rare instruments." The room started spinning. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that unless there are 2 identical 1920s Italian violins with the same maker's mark and serial number, which would be virtually impossible, your family's violin was auctioned off 3 days ago. It sold for $103,000. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not get air into my lungs. Who sold it?" I managed to choke out. There was a pause. The seller was listed as an LLC called Mitchell Investments Group. The authorized representative who handled the transaction was a man named Darius Mitchell, Mrs. Johnson, is that name familiar to you? I dropped my coffee cup. It shattered on my kitchen floor, hot liquid spreading everywhere, but I didn't move. I couldn't move. That's my son-in-law, I whispered. That's my daughter's husband. Rebecca went silent for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Johnson, I think you need to contact a lawyer immediately. If that violin was stolen and sold without the legal owner's consent, this is a serious criminal matter. I can send you all the documentation I have access to. Please, I said, send me everything. After I hung up, I sat in that kitchen surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee, and I felt something rising up inside me that I haven't felt in decades. Pure, white-hot rage. Not the kind that makes you scream and throw things. The cold, calculating kind that makes you dangerous. Darius Mitchell had looked my granddaughter in her tear-filled eyes and lied. He'd held my daughter while she cried and lied. He'd called me Mama Dot and lied. He'd sat at my Sunday dinner table, blessed the food I cooked, and the entire time he knew exactly what he'd done. I cleaned up that broken cup, went upstairs, got dressed, and drove straight to my lawyer's office. Martin Crawford has been handling my family's legal matters for 30 years. He's a sharp black man in his 60s who doesn't play games. When I walked into his office and told him what I just learned, I watched his face go from shock to angry to absolutely livid. Dorothy, this isn't just theft, he said, leaning forward in his chair. This is theft from a minor, fraud, and possibly several other charges depending on how he executed the sale. If he forged any documents or misrepresented ownership, we're talking about serious felony charges. I want him buried, Martin, I said. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I was past emotion now. I was in war mode. I want that man arrested, prosecuted, and I want my granddaughter's violin back. Let me make some calls, Martin said. Don't confront him yet. Don't tell your daughter yet. We need to build an airtight case first. But I couldn't wait. I needed to know the truth. I needed to hear it from Darius's own mouth. So I did something I'm not proud of, but I don't regret it for 1 second. I called Darius and asked him to meet me for lunch. Just the two of us. Told him I wanted to apologize for being cold to him. Lately, that grief was making me unfair. That I wanted to clear the air. That snake actually sounded pleased. Of course, Mama Dot. I'd love that. I know this has been hard on everyone. We met at a soul food restaurant in downtown Chicago. I got there early and set my phone on the table, recording app already running, tucked partially under my napkin. Legal in Illinois as long as one party consents, and I was consenting to record my own conversation. Darius walked in wearing one of his expensive suits, that familiar smile on his face. He hugged me, kissed my cheek, sat down across from me like we were about to have a pleasant family lunch. How's Aria doing? He asked, picking up his menu. The audacity of this man. She's heartbroken, Darius, I said, watching his face carefully. That violin meant everything to her. He shook his head sadly. I know. I keep hoping it'll turn up. These things sometimes do, you know? Maybe whoever took it will try to sell it, and we'll get a lead. I said, actually, that's kind of why I wanted to talk to you. Darius, can I ask you something? Of course, Mama Dot. Anything. I leaned forward and looked him dead in the eyes. Do you know anything about Mitchell Investments Group? I watched the color drain from his face, watched his jaw tighten, watched his hand freeze halfway to his water glass. For just a second, the mask slipped, and I saw the real Darius Mitchell, the panicked, cornered criminal who knew he'd been caught. Then he recovered, smiled, picked up his water, and took a sip. That's one of my business entities. Why do you ask? Just curious, I said, my voice sweet as honey. What kind of investments do you handle through that LLC? Various things, he said vaguely. Real estate, some consulting work. Why the sudden interest in my business? Mama, dot. Because that LLC just sold a violin at Whitmore Auctions in Manhattan for $103,000, I said. My voice was calm. Steady. Deadly. And that violin matches the exact description, serial number, and provenance of the instrument that was stolen from your stepdaughter's bedroom 3 weeks ago. The silence at that table was deafening. People at nearby tables kept eating, kept talking, kept laughing, completely unaware that they were sitting 15 feet away from a man whose entire life was about to implode. I don't know what you're talking about, Darius said, but his voice was shaking now. His hands were trembling. Don't lie to me, I said. I have the documentation. I have your name on the sales records. I have the serial number match. I know what you did, Darius. I know you stole from a 16-year-old girl. I know you broke into her room, took the most precious thing she owned, and sold it for cash. What I want to know is why. He sat there staring at me, and I watched several emotions flash across his face. Denial, anger, fear, and then, finally, something that looked almost like relief. You want to know why? He said quietly. His voice had changed. The smooth, confident corporate tone was gone. Now he just sounded tired, desperate, because I was about to lose everything, Dorothy. Everything. What are you talking about? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm in debt. Serious debt. The kind where people show up at your house at 3 a.m. with baseball bats. The kind where they threaten to hurt your family if you don't pay. My blood went cold. What kind of debt? Gambling, he said. Sports betting, poker, casinos. It started small, just something to do with my colleagues after work. Then I started winning. Big wins. And when you're winning, you feel invincible. You feel like you figured out the system. How much do you owe? He was quiet for a long moment. $240,000. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. 240,000? Darius, how? It happens faster than you think, he said. You lose, so you bet more to win it back. You win, so you bet more because you're on a streak. Before you know it, you've maxed out credit cards, taken out loans, borrowed against the house. And then you're dealing with loan sharks who don't care about payment plans. So you stole from a child, I said. My voice was shaking with rage now. You looked at my granddaughter's most precious possession and saw a paycheck. I didn't have a choice. His voice rose, drawing looks from other diners. He lowered it quickly. They were going to kill me, Dorothy, or hurt Jasmine, or hurt Arya. I had to do something. You had choices, I said. You could have asked for help. You could have gotten a second job. You could have declared bankruptcy. You could have done 1,000 things that didn't involve stealing from a teenager and destroying her dreams. That violin was just sitting there, he said, and I heard the desperation in his voice. Just sitting in her room. She's talented, sure, but she could get another violin. She could keep playing. But if I didn't pay these people back, we might all end up dead. Just sitting there, I repeated slowly, Darius, that violin was 150 years of my family's history. It belonged to my grandmother, who survived things you can't even imagine. It represented every sacrifice, every struggle, every triumph of Black people in this country who refused to be broken. And you looked at all of that and saw $100,000. I didn't have time to think about history, he snapped. I had 2 weeks to come up with $100,000 or lose my kneecaps. What was I supposed to do? I stood up from that table. Every eye in the restaurant was on us now, but I didn't care. You were supposed to be a man, Darius. You were supposed to protect your family, not steal from them. You were supposed to look at that 16-year-old girl who trusted you and see her as a daughter, not a mark. Dorothy, please. My lawyer has all the documentation, I said. The police will be contacting you soon. I hope that $100,000 was worth it because you're going to need it for bail and legal fees. And Darius, you're never going to see my daughter or my granddaughter again. I'm going to make sure of that. I walked out of that restaurant with my phone in my hand, recording still running, his confession captured in crystal clear audio. The war had officially begun. The hardest conversation I've ever had in my life wasn't telling my daughter that her father died. It wasn't telling her I had cancer 10 years ago. The hardest conversation was sitting across from Jasmine in my living room that evening and watching her entire world crumble as I told her that the man she'd built a life with was a thief, a liar, and a monster. "Mama, stop," she said, holding up her hand. "Just stop. I know you've never liked Darius, but accusing him of stealing from Arya, that's going too far. Even for you." I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Every word, every confession, every pathetic excuse Darius had given me at that restaurant. I watched my daughter's face as she listened, watched the denial, the confusion, the dawning horror as reality set in. When Darius's voice came through the speaker, saying, "That violin was just sitting there," Jasmine's hand flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no. This can't be real. He wouldn't do this." "Jasmine, baby, I'm so sorry," I said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. "You're lying," she said, but her voice had no conviction. "You recorded this somehow. You tricked him into saying things. You've been trying to break us up since the day we got married." "Listen to his voice," I said gently. "Listen to what he's saying. He admitted everything. The gambling debts, the loan sharks, stealing the violin, selling it at auction. It's all right there. $240,000. Jasmine said faintly. "He owes $240,000. That's what he told me." "We don't have that kind of money," she said. "Our savings is gone. I thought he'd made some bad investments. He told me the market had been rough. He told me—" Her voice trailed off as more pieces clicked into place. "Oh my God. The second mortgage. The credit cards. He said it was for a business opportunity. It was for gambling debts." I said, "And when that wasn't enough, he decided Arya's violin was the solution." Jasmine started crying then. Not the gentle tears of sadness, but the gut-wrenching sobs of betrayal. How do I tell her? How do I look my daughter in the face and tell her that the man who's been playing stepfather for 6 years is the one who stole from her, the one who made her cry herself to sleep every night for 3 weeks? "We tell her together," I said, "and we tell her that we're going to fix this. We're going to get that violin back, and we're going to make sure Darius pays for what he's done." "I want a divorce," Jasmine said suddenly. Her voice was cold now, resolved. "I want him out of my house. I want him away from Arya. I want him erased from our lives." "I've already called Martin Crawford," I said. "He's drawing up divorce papers. But Jasmine, there's more. Martin says we need to press criminal charges. Grand theft, fraud, theft from a minor. Darius could go to prison for this." "Good," Jasmine said, and the venom in her voice startled me. "Let him rot in prison. Let him lose everything the way he made Arya lose everything." When we told Arya that night, I thought my heart would stop. That child sat on the couch between me and her mother, listening to the truth, and something in her eyes just died. The last bit of innocence, the last bit of trust in the world, just disappeared. "He stole it," she said. Her voice was eerily calm. "Darius stole my violin?" "Yes, baby," Jasmine said, holding her daughter tight. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Where is it now?" Arya asked. That was the question I'd been dreading. A private collector in California bought it. We're working with lawyers to try to get it back. "Will we get it back?" she asked, looking at me with those big, hopeful eyes. I wanted to lie. I wanted to promise her that everything would be okay. But I've never lied to my granddaughter, and I wasn't about to start now. I don't know, sweetheart, but I'm going to fight for it with everything I have. Arya nodded slowly. Then she stood up, walked upstairs to her room, and closed the door. No crying, no screaming, just silence. That silence was worse than any tears could have been. 3 days later, the police arrested Darius at his office. Martin had provided them with all the documentation, the auction records, the bank transfers, my recorded confession, everything. They charged him with theft, fraud, and forgery, since he'd apparently forged documentation claiming he was the legal owner of the violin. When Jasmine got the call that he'd been arrested, she didn't say a word, just hung up the phone and nodded once, like she'd expected it. Darius made bail the next day. His parents put up their house as collateral. The first thing he did when he got out was try to call Jasmine. She blocked his number. He tried to come to the house. I called the police. He sent flowers with an apology note. Jasmine threw them in the trash without reading the card. I spent 6 years with a stranger. She told me one night while we were sitting in my kitchen. Arya was upstairs, and we were drinking wine, something Jasmine rarely did. 6 years. How did I not see it? The signs were all there. Con men are good at what they do. I said, they make you believe what they want you to believe. He met Arya when she was 10 years old. Jasmine said he went to her recitals. He helped her practice. He told her she was talented, and the whole time he was sizing up what he could take from her. Don't torture yourself with this. I said, this is on him, not you, but I brought him into our lives. Jasmine said, I defended him to you. I told Arya to trust him. This is my fault. This is Darius's fault. I said firmly, no one else's. But even as I said it, I felt the weight of my own guilt. I'd known something was wrong. I'd sensed it, and I hadn't pushed harder, hadn't dug deeper, hadn't protected my family the way I should have. That's a regret I'll carry for the rest of my life. 3 weeks after Darius's arrest, Martin Crawford arranged a phone call with the collector who'd purchased the violin. His name was Richard Westwood, a 68-year-old retired tech executive living in San Francisco who apparently collected rare instruments as a hobby. Martin put the call on speaker in his office. I sat across from him, Jasmine beside me, both of us holding our breath. Mr. Westwood, thank you for taking the time to speak with us. Martin said, I'm calling on behalf of the Johnson family regarding the violin you purchased at auction 3 weeks ago. Yes, I was informed this call would be coming. Westwood said. His voice was crisp, educated. With that particular tone, wealthy white men have when they're used to getting their way. I want to be clear from the outset. I purchased that instrument legally through a reputable auction house. I have all the documentation proving legal transfer of ownership. Mr. Westwood, that violin was stolen, Jasmine said, leaning forward. It was stolen from my 16-year-old daughter's bedroom by my ex-husband. It's been in my family for over 150 years. I'm sympathetic to your situation, Mrs. Mitchell, Westwood said, but that's a matter between you and the person who sold it. I acted in good faith. I performed due diligence. The auction house verified the seller's credentials and the provenance documentation. The provenance documentation was forged, Martin said. Mr. Mitchell created false papers claiming ownership. You were sold stolen property, Mr. Westwood. Then you need to take that up with the auction house. And Mr. Mitchell, Westwood replied, I am not responsible for returning property I legally purchased. I paid over $100,000 for that instrument. And we'll repay you, I said, my voice shaking with barely controlled anger. We'll get you your money back. But that violin belongs to my granddaughter. It's her birthright. It's her history. You have no right to keep it. Actually, Mrs. Johnson, legally I have every right, Westwood said. His voice was maddeningly calm. Under the law, I am a good faith purchaser. Unless a court orders me to return the violin and compensates me for my purchase price, interest, and any legal fees I incur defending my ownership, I have no obligation to do anything. There's a child involved, Jasmine said. Her voice was breaking now. My daughter. She's 16 years old. That violin was going to be her ticket to Juilliard. It was her connection to her ancestors. Don't you have any compassion? There was a pause on the line. For a moment, I thought maybe we'd gotten through to him. Maybe there was a shred of humanity in this man. Mrs. Mitchell, I collect rare instruments because I appreciate their history and craftsmanship, Westwood finally said. I would never intentionally purchase stolen property, but I'm also not a charity. I invested significant money in good faith. If you want the violin back, follow the legal process. Sue the auction house. Sue Mr. Mitchell. Get a court order. But I'm not simply handing over a six-figure asset because you ask nicely. You're going to keep a child's stolen property because of money? I said, my voice rising. What kind of man does that make you? A practical one, Westwood said. I'm sorry for your situation. Truly, but this conversation is over. If you wish to pursue legal action, have your attorney contact mine. He hung up. The three of us sat in Martin's office in stunned silence. Finally, Jasmine spoke. He's going to keep it. That man is going to keep my daughter's violin. Not without a fight, Martin said. We can sue. We have multiple legal avenues here. How long will that take? I asked. Martin hesitated. In a case like this, with interstate jurisdiction, a good faith purchaser defense, and likely significant legal resistance from Westwood, could be 2 years, maybe 3. And that's if we win. 2 years, Jasmine repeated. Aria will be graduated by then. Her Juilliard audition is in 8 months. There's another option, Martin said carefully. We could try to raise the money to buy it back from him directly. Offer him his purchase price plus a premium. Make it worth his while. $103,000 plus a premium? Jasmine said, Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? I'm going through a divorce. My husband destroyed our finances. I'm barely keeping the house. We could start a fundraiser. I suggested, tell Aria's story. Get the community involved. And what if we raise $50,000? $75,000? Jasmine shook her head. We'd still be short, and Westwood already made it clear he's not interested in charity cases. Then we fight this in court, Martin said. We build a case against the auction house for failing to properly verify the provenance. We go after Darius's assets to recover damages. We file every motion, every appeal, every legal maneuver available to us. While Aria watches her dreams die a little more each day, Jasmine said quietly, That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Somewhere in San Francisco, a man I'd never met was in possession of my family's history. A man who valued money more than justice. A man who could afford to tie us up in court for years while a 16-year-old girl's future slipped away. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. This wasn't the hot, explosive anger that makes you scream. This was cold, calculated, the kind of anger that makes you dangerous. Richard Westwood thought this was over, thought he could hide behind legal technicalities and good faith purchaser laws, thought he could steal my granddaughter's future because he had money and lawyers. He was about to learn that you don't mess with a grandmother who's got nothing left to lose. I started making phone calls, started doing research, started putting together a plan that would make Richard Westwood wish he'd never heard the name Johnson. If the law wouldn't give us justice, I'd find another way. 2 months after Darius's arrest, right when we thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, they did. Darius's lawyer filed a motion arguing that the violin should be considered marital property, and that since he was technically still married to Jasmine at the time of the sale, he had a right to liquidate joint assets to pay off joint debts. When Martin called to tell me about this new legal strategy, I actually laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the audacity was so breathtaking I didn't know how else to react. He's claiming what? Jasmine said when I told her. We were sitting in her kitchen, and she looked like she hadn't slept in days. The divorce proceedings were draining her. Finding out her entire marriage had been built on lies was destroying her. He's saying the violin was marital property. I repeated. His lawyer is arguing that since it was kept in the marital home and used by Aria, who he was acting as a legal guardian to, he had a right to sell it to cover marital debts. But it's not marital property. Jasmine shouted, "It's been in your family for generations. He has no claim to it." I know that, baby. Martin knows that. Any reasonable person knows that. But Darius is throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. His lawyer is trying to muddy the waters, create reasonable doubt about ownership. This is insane, Jasmine said. She put her head in her hands. When does this end, Mama? When do we get to stop fighting? I didn't have an answer for her, because the truth was, I didn't know when it would end. I'd never dealt with anyone this shameless, this willing to destroy everything and everyone around them to save their own skin. The preliminary hearing for Darius's criminal trial was scheduled for the following week. Martin wanted us to attend to show the judge the human impact of Darius's crimes. Show them that this wasn't just about property. It was about a family torn apart and a child's future destroyed. When we walked into that courtroom, I held Aria's hand on one side and Jasmine's on the other. Darius was already there with his attorney, wearing a nice suit, looking like a respectable businessman instead of the thief he really was. When he saw us, he actually smiled. Smiled, like we were all there for some pleasant family gathering instead of his criminal trial. "All rise," the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Judge Morrison was a black woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took her seat, reviewed the case file, and looked directly at Darius. "Mr. Mitchell, you're charged with grand theft, fraud, and forgery. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Darius said confidently. Martin presented our evidence. The auction records, the forged provenance documents, my recorded conversation with Darius where he confessed to everything. Darius's lawyer, a slick man named Robert Cardoza, stood up and argued that the recording was obtained under false pretenses, that Darius had been emotionally manipulated into making statements he didn't mean, that the violin's ownership was murky at best. "Your Honor, my client admits he made a terrible mistake," Cardoza said. "He was facing death threats from loan sharks. He acted out of desperation to protect his family. He deeply regrets his actions, but this case is far more complicated than the prosecution is making it seem." Protecting his family? I couldn't help myself. I stood up in the gallery. He stole from a child. He stole from his own stepdaughter. "Mrs. Johnson, sit down," Judge Morrison said, but her voice wasn't unkind. "I understand your anger, but outbursts in my courtroom won't help your case." "I'm sorry, Your Honor," I said, sitting back down. But I wasn't sorry. Not even a little bit. Judge Morrison looked at Darius for a long moment. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to set bail at $250,000. You're to have no contact with the victims in this case. Trial date is set for 4 months from today. Court adjourned." As we filed out of the courtroom, Darius tried to approach Jasmine. "Baby, please just let me explain." "Don't you dare call me that," Jasmine said. Her voice was ice cold. "You're nothing to me. Nothing. I did it for us. Darius called after her as his lawyer pulled him away. I did it to save us. You did it to save yourself. I shot back. And you destroyed everything in the process. That night, Arya asked me a question that broke my heart. Grandma, why does everyone keep saying the violin might be gone forever? Can't the judge just make that man give it back? I sat down next to her on her bed. It's complicated, sweetheart. The man who bought the violin says he didn't know it was stolen. So the law protects him too. But it's mine, Arya said. Her voice was small, defeated. It's been in our family forever. How can the law say it's his now? Because the law isn't always fair, baby. Sometimes the law protects people with money and power more than it protects people like us. So we're just going to lose? Darius is going to get away with this. I looked at my granddaughter, at the resignation in her eyes, at the way 6 months had aged her beyond her years. No, I said firmly, Darius is not going to get away with this. I promise you that. How do you know? Because I'm not done fighting yet, I said, not by a long shot. What Arya didn't know was that I'd already started putting a plan into motion, a plan that didn't involve lawyers or judges or playing by rules that were designed to protect men like Richard Westwood and Darius Mitchell. If they wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too, and I'd been alive long enough to know exactly how to hit people where it hurts most. I hired a private investigator named Jamal Thompson. Before you judge me, understand that desperate times call for desperate measures. Jamal was a retired Chicago police detective who specialized in financial crimes. If anyone could dig up dirt on Darius and help us track down the violin, it was him. Mrs. Johnson, I'll be straight with you, Jamal said when we met at a coffee shop downtown. What you're asking me to do is legal, but it's going to be expensive. Following paper trails, conducting surveillance, tracking assets, this could run you $10,000 or more. I don't care about the money, I said. I need to know everything about Darius Mitchell. Every debt, every lie, every secret he's been hiding. And I need to know everything about Richard Westwood. I need leverage. Leverage for what? To get my granddaughter's violin back. I said, one way or another. Jamal studied me for a moment. You know I can't help you do anything illegal. I'm not asking you to, I said. I'm asking you to find the truth. What I do with that truth is my business. Jamal started his investigation immediately. Within 2 weeks, he came back with information that made my blood boil even hotter. Darius's gambling debts. They were real, but they were only part of the story. Jamal discovered that Darius had been living a double life for years. He had a separate apartment in downtown Chicago that Jasmine knew nothing about. He'd been having multiple affairs. He'd stolen money from his own company, which was why he'd been demoted 6 months ago. Something else he'd lied to Jasmine about. This man is a serial fraudster. Jamal told me, laying out documents and photographs on his desk. He's been scamming people for years. Small cons, mostly. Insurance fraud. Identity theft of deceased relatives to open credit cards. He's clever about it. Never goes big enough to draw serious attention. But it's a pattern. Can we use any of this in court? I asked. Some of it, maybe. Your lawyer would know better than me. But Mrs. Johnson, there's more. Darius isn't just in debt to loan sharks. He owes money to some seriously dangerous people. The kind who don't take no for an answer. How dangerous? Jamal pulled out a photograph. It showed Darius meeting with a man outside a warehouse. The man was covered in tattoos, built like a linebacker. That's Vincent Moretti. He's connected to organized crime in Chicago. Word on the street is Darius owes him about $150 grand. My stomach dropped. Are you saying the mob is after my son-in-law? Ex-son-in-law, Jamal corrected. And yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Darius's gambling problem isn't just with casinos and sports books. He borrowed from people who expect to be paid back, and they don't care if you're broke or scared or sorry. Does Jasmine know about any of this? I doubt it. Darius has been keeping this part of his life completely separate. But Mrs. Johnson, here's the thing that concerns me. If these people know Darius is facing criminal charges, if they know he's about to lose everything, they might come after his family to send a message. Fear shot through me. They go after Jasmine? After Arya? It's possible. Not likely, but possible. You might want to consider taking some precautions. Security system. Change the locks. Maybe have them stay with you for a while. I thanked Jamal and left his office in a daze. This was so much bigger than I'd realized. Darius hadn't just stolen from Arya. He put all of us in danger. When I told Jasmine about the investigation results, she collapsed into a chair like someone had cut her strings. I didn't know him at all, she whispered. 6 years. I shared a bed with this man. I trusted him with my daughter. And he was a complete stranger. He's a con artist, baby. That's what they do. They make you believe the lie. What do we do about the mob thing? Jasmine asked. Should we be scared? We're going to be careful, I said. You and Arya are going to stay with me for a while. We're going to install security cameras. And we're going to make sure everyone knows we have nothing to do with Darius's debts. This is nightmare, Jasmine said. How did my life turn into this nightmare? But the investigation into Richard Westwood yielded even more interesting results. Jamal discovered that Westwood had a reputation in the rare instrument collecting community, and it wasn't a good one. This guy has been sued twice for purchasing items of questionable provenance. Jamal told me. Both cases settled out of court, but there's a pattern here. He buys valuable items at auction, claims good faith purchase, then fights tooth and nail to keep them even when evidence of theft surfaces. So he does this regularly? Looks like it. He's a predatory collector. He knows there's a gray area in the law regarding good faith purchasers, and he exploits it, buys items that might be stolen, banks on the original owners not having the resources to fight him in court. That's disgusting. It's also legal, unfortunately, unless someone can prove he knew the items were stolen at the time of purchase. Can we prove that with the violin? Jamal shook his head. Not from what I've found so far. The auction house did their due diligence, at least on paper. Westwood has deniability. I sat back in my chair, thinking. Richard Westwood was a predator who made his living stealing other people's treasures and hiding behind the law. Darius was a con artist who destroyed his own family to feed his addictions. And somewhere between these two terrible men was my granddaughter's violin, sitting in a San Francisco mansion, gathering dust while Arya's dreams died a little more each day. Jamal, I said slowly, I need you to find out everything about Richard Westwood. Where he lives, his daily routine, his security system, his insurance policies, his weaknesses, everything. Jamal looked at me carefully. Mrs. Johnson, what exactly are you planning? I'm planning to get my granddaughter's violin back, I said, by whatever means necessary. I can't be part of anything illegal. You won't be, I assured him. You're just gathering information. What I do with it is on me. Jamal hesitated, then nodded. All right, but be careful. Men like Westwood don't like being challenged, and they have resources to make your life very difficult. Let him try, I said. He hasn't met a black grandmother from Chicago who's got nothing left to lose. 3 months after the violin disappeared, Arya stopped going to school. Just stopped. She'd get dressed in the morning, wait for the bus, then turn around and walk back into the house the moment Jasmine left for work. The school called me first. Mrs. Johnson, Arya has missed 12 days in the past 3 weeks. We're concerned. Is everything all right at home? Everything was not all right at home. Everything was falling apart. I went over to Jasmine's house and found Aria in her room, still in her pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, staring at the empty violin case on her desk. "Baby girl," I said softly, sitting down on her bed. "Talk to me." "There's nothing to talk about," Aria said. Her voice was flat. "Empty. It's gone. My whole future is gone." "That's not true. You're still talented. You can still play. You can still get into Juilliard." "With what violin, Grandma?" She finally looked at me, and the despair in her eyes made me want to weep. "The rental they gave me is garbage. It sounds like nails on a chalkboard compared to mine. Every time I try to practice, all I hear is what I've lost." "So you're just going to give up? After all the work you've put in? After all the dreams you've had? What's the point?" Aria said. "Someone's always going to take it away. Darius took the violin. The judge is going to let that man in California keep it. The universe is telling me I'm not meant to have nice things. I'm not meant to succeed." "Aria Johnson, you listen to me," I said firmly. "You come from a line of black women who survived slavery, who survived Jim Crow, who survived every attempt to break their spirits. Your great-great-great-grandmother played that violin in secret because the law said she wasn't allowed to own property. Your great-grandmother played it during the Depression when she didn't know where her next meal was coming from. Your grandmother, me, played it during the civil rights movement when people were dying in the streets for demanding basic dignity. And you're going to sit here and tell me you're giving up because one man stole from you." "It's not just one man," Aria said. "It's everyone. The police didn't help. The judge didn't help. That collector doesn't care. Darius doesn't care. Nobody cares about what that violin meant to me." "I care," I said. "Your mother cares. Every ancestor who came before you cares. And we're not done fighting." "Fighting for what?" "It's been 3 months, Grandma. If we were going to get it back, we would have by now." I took a deep breath. "Aria, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She looked at me warily. "Trust you to do what?" "Trust me to fix this," I said. "I'm working on something. I can't tell you what yet, but I need you to hold on a little longer. Can you do that for me?" Aria was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay, Grandma, but I can't go back to school yet. I can't sit in orchestra practice with that rental violin while everyone asks me what happened to my real one." "Take the time you need," I said, "but don't give up on your music. Practice, even if it sounds wrong, even if it hurts, because when we get that violin back, and we will get it back, you need to be ready." "You really think we'll get it back?" "Baby girl, I don't just think it. I know it. Your grandmother didn't survive 73 years in this world by accepting defeat. And neither will you." After I left Aria's house, I sat in my car and cried for the first time since this nightmare started. Cried for my granddaughter's broken spirit. Cried for my daughter's shattered marriage. Cried for the violation of trust that had poisoned my entire family. Then I dried my tears, started my car, and drove to a meeting I'd set up with someone who could help me execute the plan I'd been forming. A plan that would either save my family or destroy what was left of my reputation. But I didn't care anymore. Reputation doesn't mean anything when your granddaughter has lost faith in the world. I was about to do something I never thought I'd do in my entire life. Something that would shock my friends, horrify my pastor, and probably disappoint every upstanding person who'd ever known me. But sometimes being a good grandmother means being willing to be a bad person. And I was ready to be the villain if that's what it took to save my grandbaby. The person I met with was named Tanya Bradford. We'd known each other 30 years ago when we both worked at the same hospital, me as a nurse, her in administration. Tanya had gotten fired for accessing patient records she wasn't authorized to see, and there were rumors she'd sold that information to lawyers looking for malpractice cases. I hadn't spoken to her in 25 years, but when I reached out, she agreed to meet me at a diner on the South Side. Dorothy Johnson, Tanya said, sliding into the booth across from me. She looked good for 68, sharp eyes, expensive clothes, the confidence of someone who'd found their niche in life, even if that niche was morally questionable. This is a surprise. What could you possibly need from someone like me? I didn't waste time with small talk. I need help stealing something back. Tanya's eyebrows rose. Stealing? You, Dorothy Johnson, who reported me to the nursing board 30 years ago for ethical violations. I was wrong to do that, I said. I was young and self-righteous. I thought playing by the rules would make the world fair. And now I know the rules are designed to protect people with money and power. They're not designed to protect people like me. So I need to break them. I told her everything. The violin, Darius, Richard Westwood, the legal dead ends, Aria's deteriorating mental state. Tanya listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she sat back and studied me. You want to steal the violin back from Westwood's house in San Francisco? Yes. Do you have any idea how difficult that would be? High-end security systems, probably a safe, definitely insurance company protocols. We're not talking about shoplifting here, Dorothy. We're talking about a federal crime. I know, I said. That's why I need your help. You know people who do this kind of thing. I know people who used to do this kind of thing. Tanya corrected. Most of them are retired or in prison, and the ones who are still operating charge serious money. How much? For a job like this? 50,000. Maybe more. I felt my heart sink. I'd saved 30,000 over the years, but 50 was beyond my reach. What if I could get half? 25,000. Tanya shook her head. Dorothy, even if you could afford it, you have to understand something. These people don't take jobs like this on principle. They take them for profit. And if things go wrong, you're looking at serious prison time. I don't care, I said. I'm 73 years old. What are they going to do? Put me in prison for 10 years. I'll be dead before I serve the sentence. But Aria, she's 16. Her whole life is ahead of her. I can't let that violin stay stolen. I can't let her believe that evil wins. Tanya was quiet for a long time. There might be another way, she finally said. A way that doesn't involve actual theft. I'm listening. Westwood is a collector, right? He buys and sells rare instruments. What if someone offered him something more valuable than your violin? Something he couldn't resist? What if, in the process of authenticating that new item, his attention was elsewhere and certain security measures were temporarily compromised? You're talking about running a con. I'm talking about creating an opportunity. Tanya said carefully. I know someone in San Francisco, Jamila Washington. She's an art dealer, legitimate mostly, but she understands the gray areas. She might be willing to help, especially if there's a human interest angle. Why would she help us? Because Jamila lost her mother's wedding ring in a similar situation. It was stolen, sold to a collector, and she couldn't get it back legally. She understands what it's like to watch something precious be held hostage by rich people who use the law as a weapon. Can you set up a meeting? I can try. But Dorothy, you need to understand something. If we do this, if we go down this road, there's no turning back. You'll be committing fraud, at minimum, possibly several other crimes. Your reputation in your community will be destroyed if it comes out. Your family could be implicated. My family is already destroyed, I said. My granddaughter has stopped going to school. My daughter is going through a devastating divorce. My son-in-law is a criminal facing prison time. What reputation do I have left to protect? Tanya nodded slowly. All right, I'll reach out to Jamila, but I can't promise anything. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to San Francisco. It was the first time I'd flown in 5 years, and every dollar of that plane ticket hurt to spend. But I was committed now. I crossed a line I never thought I'd cross. Jamila Washington met me at a coffee shop in the Mission District. She was a striking black woman in her 40s with natural hair and kind eyes that had seen hardship. Mrs. Johnson, she said, shaking my hand, Tanya told me your story. I'm so sorry for what you're going through. Thank you for meeting with me, I said. I don't know what Tanya told you about what I'm hoping to do. She said you need creative solutions to a legal problem. Jamila said carefully. She said your granddaughter's violin is being held by Richard Westwood, who has a reputation for exploiting good faith purchaser laws. That's right. I need to get it back. Westwood is careful. Jamila said he's been sued multiple times, and he's never lost. He keeps his collection in a climate-controlled room in his house, probably with museum-quality security. Getting physical access would be nearly impossible. Then what do we do? Jamila leaned forward. We make him want to give it back. Or more precisely, we make him believe he's made a mistake that could cost him much more than the violin is worth. I don't understand. Westwood's reputation in the collector community is everything to him. If word got out that he's knowingly keeping stolen property, especially stolen from a child, other collectors might not want to do business with him. Auction houses might blacklist him. His whole network could collapse. But he claims he didn't know it was stolen. Claims is the right word. Jamila said, because I did some research after Tanya contacted me. Westwood was sent several emails before the auction from the auction house's legal team warning him that the provenance on that violin looked questionable. He chose to proceed with the purchase anyway. That's not good faith. That's willful blindness. My heart started racing. Can you prove that? I have a contact who works at Whitmore Auctions. She's seen the email chain. She's willing to testify, but only if there's legal protection for her. She could lose her job. Would that be enough to force Westwood to return the violin? It might be, or it might just make him dig in deeper out of spite. Rich men don't like being challenged. But here's what I'm thinking. What if we combine public pressure with legal pressure? What if we make this story go viral? A 73-year-old black grandmother trying to get her granddaughter's stolen violin back from a wealthy white collector who knew it was stolen but bought it anyway. You think people would care? Mrs. Johnson, people love two things, underdogs and villains. You're the underdog. Westwood is the villain. If we tell this story right, we could have the entire country on your side. And when you're a wealthy collector who depends on reputation, that kind of negative attention can be devastating. How do we tell the story? Jamila smiled. Leave that to me. I know journalists, social media influencers, activists. We're going to make Richard Westwood regret the day he ever heard the name Aria Johnson. For the first time in months, I felt hope blooming in my chest. Real, genuine hope. Not the desperate hope of a grandmother clinging to impossible dreams, but the strategic hope of someone who finally had a plan that might actually work. When do we start? I asked. We started the moment you walked through that door. Jamila said, by the time we're done, Richard Westwood is going to wish he'd never bought that violin. 3 days after I returned from San Francisco, the story hit. Jamila had connected me with a journalist named Tamika Evans who wrote for a major online publication. He'd interviewed me, interviewed Aria, interviewed Jasmine, and gathered all the documentation about Darius's theft and Westwood's purchase. The headline read, A Family's Heirloom, a Teen's Dreams, and the Wealthy Collector Who Won't Give It Back. Within 24 hours, it had been shared over 50,000 times on social media. News outlets picked it up. Local Chicago stations reached out. National morning shows wanted interviews. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Aria's stolen violin. The article didn't pull any punches. It detailed Darius's betrayal, the emotional devastation Aria suffered, the legal runaround we'd gotten, and Westwood's refusal to return the violin despite knowing the full story. It included photos of Aria as a child playing the violin, photos of my grandmother, Esther May, documentation of our family history. It made Westwood look like exactly what he was, a wealthy predator who exploited legal technicalities to keep stolen property. The reaction was overwhelming. People were outraged. The comments sections across every platform were flooded with anger directed at Westwood and sympathy for Aria. This is disgusting. That man has no soul. How can he sleep at night knowing he's destroying a child's dreams? This is exactly what's wrong with America. Rich people think they can buy anything, including other people's heritage. Someone started a GoFundMe to help us buy the violin back. Within a week, it had raised $40,000. People from all over the country, people we'd never met, were donating $10, $20, $50 with messages of support and encouragement. From one Black grandmother to another, don't give up. My daughter plays violin too. This breaks my heart. Here's what I can give. My family heirlooms were stolen too. I know your pain. Keep fighting. Aria called me crying after she saw the GoFundMe total. Grandma, people care. Strangers who don't even know me care about getting my violin back. Of course they care, baby. I said, because your story matters. Because injustice should make people angry. Because decent people know what Westwood is doing is wrong. But the support wasn't universal. Westwood's defenders came out too, mostly wealthy collectors and lawyers who argued he'd done nothing illegal. He purchased the violin in good faith. He's not obligated to return it. This is emotional blackmail. The law protects purchasers for a reason. If we force Westwood to return it, we'll destroy the entire art and collectibles market. One particularly nasty comment stuck with me. Maybe if these people took better care of their possessions, they wouldn't get stolen. This whole situation reeks of trying to scam a wealthy man out of his legitimate purchase. I showed it to Jamila during one of our phone calls. How do you deal with people saying things like this? You remember that those people are exactly why we're fighting. Jamila said, they think wealth makes you immune to moral obligations. They think having money means you can do whatever you want without consequences. We're going to prove them wrong. The pressure on Westwood intensified. News crews showed up at his San Francisco home. The auction house that sold him the violin issued a statement distancing themselves from him and announcing an internal review of their authentication procedures. Fellow collectors started questioning whether they wanted to be associated with him. And then the death threats started. I don't know who sent them, and I don't condone it. But Westwood started receiving threatening messages from people saying if he didn't return the violin, they'd make his life hell. Some threatened property damage. Others threatened violence. Jamila called me immediately when she heard. Mrs. Johnson, you need to publicly denounce the threats. This could backfire spectacularly if people think we're encouraging violence. I recorded a video that Jamila posted to social media. My family and I do not support any threats or violence directed at Mr. Westwood or anyone else. We're fighting for justice through legal and peaceful means. Threatening people is wrong, period. If you support our family, please show that support through kindness and advocacy, not through threats. The video helped calm things down, but the damage to Westwood's reputation was done. Articles started appearing about his history of purchasing items with questionable provenance. Other families came forward with similar stories of him refusing to return items that turned out to be stolen. Richard Westwood was becoming a pariah in his own community. 2 weeks after the story broke, Westwood's lawyer called Martin Crawford. My client is prepared to discuss resolution options. Martin called me immediately. He's willing to talk. We might actually get the violin back. I felt tears streaming down my face. What does he want? I don't know yet. But Dorothy, don't get your hopes up too high. He might want compensation. He might want immunity from lawsuits. Rich men don't surrender easily, even when they've lost in the court of public opinion. I don't care what he wants. I said, as long as Aria gets her violin back, he can have whatever he needs to feel like he won. I'll set up a meeting with his legal team. Are you prepared to negotiate? Martin, I'm prepared to do whatever it takes. That night, I lay in bed thinking about everything that had happened in the past 4 months. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the rage, the desperation, and now, finally, a glimmer of hope that we might actually win. I thought about my grandmother Esther May, who'd survived things I couldn't imagine and still found the strength to make music. I thought about every ancestor who'd fought for dignity in a world designed to deny it to them. I thought about Aria, who deserved to inherit that legacy of strength and resilience. And I thought about the fact that sometimes, just sometimes, if you fight long enough and loud enough and refuse to accept defeat, justice actually wins. We weren't there yet, but we were closer than we'd ever been. The meeting with Westwood's lawyers happened at Martin Crawford's office. It was me, Jasmine, Martin, and Westwood's legal team, 3 expensive lawyers in expensive suits who looked at us like we were a problem they needed to make disappear. Let's be direct, the lead lawyer said. His name was Jonathan Pierce, and he had the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. My client is prepared to return the violin to Ms. Aria Johnson under certain conditions. What conditions? Martin asked. Full reimbursement of the purchase price, $103,000, plus an additional $50,000 for legal fees, emotional distress, and damage to his reputation. That's $153,000 total. The room went silent. Finally, Jasmine spoke. Are you serious? He stole from my daughter, and now he wants her to pay him to get her own property back. My client didn't steal anything, Pierce said smoothly. He purchased the violin legally. He's willing to return it as a gesture of goodwill, but he's not willing to suffer financial loss for someone else's criminal actions. The GoFundMe has $40,000. I said, we don't have $153,000. That's impossible. Then we have nothing further to discuss. Pierce said, standing up, my client will retain the violin. Good day. Wait, Martin said, sit down. Let's talk about this reasonably. Pierce sat back down, but his expression made it clear he thought we were wasting his time. Your client's reputation is in ruins, Martin said. Every article written about this case makes him look like a heartless predator. Other collectors are distancing themselves from him. Is he really willing to keep the violin and continue being the villain in a story that millions of people are following? My client is willing to weather temporary negative publicity to defend the principle of good faith purchaser protections. Pierce said, if he caves to public pressure, he's admitting he did something wrong. He didn't. He purchased a violin that the auction house warned him had questionable provenance. Martin countered. We have emails proving he was advised to conduct additional authentication. He chose to ignore that advice. That's not good faith. That's willful ignorance. Pierce's expression tightened slightly. Those emails are privileged communications between my client and the auction house. No, they're not, Martin said. They're business records that establish your client's state of mind at the time of purchase, and they show he knew there were red flags, which means the good faith purchaser defense is questionable at best. We'll let a judge decide that. Pierce said. Fine, Martin said. Let's go to trial. Let's put your client on the stand and let him explain to a jury why he ignored warnings about stolen property. Let's let that jury hear about his history of purchasing items with questionable provenance. Let's see how his reputation survives that. I watched the three lawyers exchange glances. They were worried. They should be. We're prepared to reduce the amount. Pierce finally said, 100,000. That's our final offer. 60,000. Martin said, the GoFundMe has 40. Mrs. Johnson can borrow the rest against her home. That's our final offer. 75. Pierce countered. 65. Martin said, and you release any and all claims against the Johnson family for defamation, emotional distress, or any other tort. You also issue a public statement saying you're returning the violin voluntarily as the right thing to do. Pierce looked at his colleagues. They whispered amongst themselves. Finally, he nodded. 65,000. No admission of wrongdoing. Neutral public statement. And this settles all claims. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell them they were thieves just like Darius, just wearing better suits. But Arya needed that violin. And we were so close. We need time to raise the additional 25,000. Jasmine said. You have 2 weeks. Pierce said. After that, the offer expires, and we'll see you in court. After they left, I sat in Martin's office feeling defeated. We'd won, technically. We'd negotiated the return of the violin. But it felt like losing. We were paying a ransom for property that was stolen from us. This is how it always works, Martin said quietly. People with money and power make you pay for justice. They turn everything into a transaction. But Dorothy, you won. You're getting the violin back. At what cost? I said, we're paying $65,000. I'm taking out a loan against my house. All because some rich man decided he had more right to our family heirloom than we did. I know, Martin said, but think about Arya. Think about what this means for her future. He was right, of course, but it still felt like swallowing poison. That night, I updated the GoFundMe with the news. I explained the negotiation, explained we needed $25,000 more dollars, explained that while it felt unjust to pay for our own property back, it was the only way to end this nightmare. The response was overwhelming. Within 48 hours, donations poured in from across the country. People were angry on our behalf. They understood the injustice. They wanted to help. 7 days after the negotiation, we hit our goal, $65,000. Enough to bring Arya's violin home. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at the GoFundMe total, reading the messages from strangers who'd given what they could, and I cried. Not tears of sadness this time. Tears of gratitude. Tears of relief. Tears of amazement that thousands of people I'd never met cared enough about my granddaughter to help save her future. The transaction happened 2 weeks later at a bank in San Francisco. Martin flew out with me and Jasmine. Arya stayed in Chicago. We wanted to surprise her with the violin in person. Westwood didn't attend. Just his lawyers and a representative from his insurance company. They brought the violin in its case, had us verify the serial number, made us sign a stack of legal documents releasing all claims. When they handed over the case, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The weight that had been crushing my chest for 5 months lifted. It was real. It was happening. We were bringing it home. On the plane back to Chicago, Jasmine held the violin case on her lap the entire flight. She didn't put it in the overhead bin, didn't let it out of her sight. We'd learned our lesson about trusting other people with our treasures. Mama, we did it, she said, tears streaming down her face. We actually did it. We did, baby, I said, squeezing her hand. We fought and we won. What do we tell Arya? We tell her the truth. We tell her that sometimes the world is cruel and unjust, but that doesn't mean you stop fighting. We tell her that thousands of people she never met loved her enough to help bring her violin home. We tell her that her ancestors' legacy is safe. When we got back to Chicago, we drove straight to my house, where Arya was waiting with a neighbor who'd been watching her. The moment we walked through the door with that violin case, Arya's face transformed. "Is that?" She couldn't even finish the sentence. "It's yours, baby," Jasmine said, setting the case on the coffee table. "Open it." Arya's hands were shaking so badly she could barely work the clasps. When she finally opened the case and saw that violin lying there, exactly as she remembered it, she let out a sound I'll never forget, half sob, half laugh, pure joy and relief mixed together. She picked it up with trembling hands, held it like it was made of glass, and whispered, "You came home. You came back to me." Then she tucked it under her chin, picked up the bow, and played. The sound that filled my living room was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Not because the notes were perfect, Arya was crying too hard for that, but because it was the sound of healing, the sound of justice, the sound of a family's legacy being restored. We all cried. Even my neighbor cried. When Arya finally stopped playing, she looked at us with red, swollen eyes and said, "How did you do it? How did you get it back?" "Your grandmother refused to quit," Jasmine said. "She fought when I wanted to give up. She believed when I'd lost hope. She moved heaven and earth to bring your violin home." Arya threw her arms around me. "Thank you, Grandma. Thank you, thank you, thank you." "You don't have to thank me, baby girl," I said, holding her tight. "This is what family does. We protect each other. We fight for each other. We never give up on each other." That night, the three of us sat in my living room while Arya played every piece she knew. The music poured out of her like a dam had burst. She played until her fingers hurt, until her arms were sore, until she was too exhausted to play anymore. When she finally set the violin down, she looked at me and said, "Grandma, I'm going back to school tomorrow. I'm going to practice every day. I'm going to make Juilliard. I'm going to make everyone who helped us proud." "You already make us proud," I said, "but I can't wait to watch you soar." We'd won. Against all odds, against wealthy lawyers and unjust laws, and a system designed to protect the powerful, we'd won. But the war wasn't over yet, because Darius Mitchell still had to face justice. And I was going to make sure he paid for every tear my granddaughter had cried. For months after Arya's violin came home, Darius's criminal trial began. The charges were serious: grand theft, fraud, forgery, and theft from a minor. If convicted on all counts, he could face up to 15 years in prison. I sat in that courtroom every single day, front row, making sure Darius saw me, making sure he knew I wasn't going anywhere until justice was served. The prosecution built their case methodically. They presented the auction records showing Darius had sold the violin through his LLC. They presented the forged provenance documents he'd created. They played my recording of his confession at the restaurant. Darius's defense attorney tried to paint him as a desperate man who made a terrible mistake under duress. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client was facing death threats from dangerous criminals. He was trying to protect his family. He made a bad choice, yes, but it was born of fear, not malice. When it was time for victim impact statements, Jasmine went first. She stood at that podium and looked directly at Darius. "You were my husband. I trusted you with my life, with my daughter's life, with my family's legacy. And you betrayed all of us in the most calculated, heartless way possible. You didn't just steal a violin. You stole my daughter's innocence. You stole her faith in people. You stole years of peace and security from my mother. You destroyed our family for gambling debts. I hope you think about that every day for the rest of your life." Darius wouldn't look at her, just stared at the table in front of him. Then it was Arya's turn. My 16-year-old granddaughter walked to that podium, stood in front of the man who'd stolen from her, and spoke with a strength that made my heart swell with pride. "I called you Dad," she said. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. "I trusted you. I showed you my violin. I told you about my dreams. I let you into my life. And you looked at the thing I loved most in the world and saw money. You took it while I was at my friend's birthday party. You made me come home to find my room destroyed. You watched me cry for weeks, and you said nothing. You knew where it was the whole time, and you let me suffer. I'm 16 years old, and I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if people I love are going to betray me. That's what you did. You didn't just steal a violin. You stole my ability to trust. There wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom. Even the judge looked affected. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to that podium slowly. My arthritis was acting up, and I used my cane for support. I looked at Darius, and for the first time since his arrest, he looked back at me. "Darius Mitchell, I welcomed you into my family. I said, I cooked for you every Sunday. I prayed for you. I called you son. And you repaid that love by stealing 150 years of my family's history. That violin survived slavery. It survived the Great Depression. It survived Jim Crow and segregation and every attempt to erase black culture from this country. It survived all of that, but it couldn't survive your greed." My voice broke, but I pushed through. "You didn't just steal from Aria. You stole from every ancestor who came before her. You stole from my grandmother Esther May, who played that violin in secret because the law said she wasn't allowed to own property. You stole from my mother Catherine, who played it during the Depression to keep our spirits up. You stole from me, from my daughter, from our entire lineage. And for what? Gambling debts, casinos, sports betting. You traded a priceless piece of black history for poker chips and slot machines." I leaned forward on the podium. I'm 73 years old. I don't have many years left on this earth. But I will die knowing that I fought for my family. I will die knowing that I didn't let you get away with this. I will die knowing that justice, however imperfect, was served. Can you say the same? Will you die knowing you destroyed the people who loved you for 30 pieces of silver? The courtroom was silent when I finished. I walked back to my seat, and Jasmine took my hand. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. Darius showed no emotion when the verdict was read, just sat there like a statue while the judge scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later. At the sentencing hearing, the judge looked at Darius and said, "Mr. Mitchell, you violated the sacred trust of family. You stole from a child who loved you. You showed no remorse until you were caught. And even then, your remorse seems directed at getting caught rather than at the harm you caused. I'm sentencing you to 12 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 8 years. Additionally, you're ordered to pay restitution of $65,000 to the Johnson family for the costs they incurred recovering the stolen property. 12 years. 8 before parole eligibility. As they led Darius away in handcuffs, he finally looked at Jasmine one last time. I don't know what he was hoping to see. Forgiveness maybe, or regret, or some sign that she still cared. What he saw was a woman who'd moved on. A woman who was stronger without him than she'd ever been with him. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us asking for statements. Jasmine spoke first. "Justice was served today. My ex-husband will face consequences for his actions. But more importantly, my daughter got her violin back, and our family is healing. That's what matters most." When they asked me how I felt, I said, "I feel relieved that this chapter is over. I feel grateful to everyone who supported us, and I feel proud that my granddaughter knows her family will fight for her no matter what." That night, we had dinner at my house. Me, Jasmine, Aria, and a few close friends who'd supported us throughout this nightmare. Aria played her violin for us, and the music was sweeter than anything I'd ever heard. "Grandma," Aria said during dessert, "I got my Juilliard audition date. It's in 6 weeks." 6 weeks. Jasmine said, "Baby, are you ready?" Aria smiled. A real smile, the first genuine smile I'd seen on her face in almost a year. "Yeah, Mom, I'm ready. I've got my violin back. I've got my family. I've got my confidence back. I'm going to walk into that audition and show them what 150 years of Black excellence sounds like." "That's my girl," I said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "That's my brilliant, talented, unstoppable granddaughter." We'd been through hell and back. We'd faced betrayal, theft, legal battles, financial strain, and heartbreak that nearly broke us. But we'd survived. More than survived. We'd won. And now my granddaughter was going to take that violin, that symbol of our family's resilience, and use it to build the future our ancestors dreamed of. Darius Mitchell thought he could steal that from us. Richard Westwood thought he could keep it from us. The legal system thought it could make us give up. They all learned the same lesson. Never underestimate a grandmother who's fighting for her family's legacy. 6 weeks later, I sat in a waiting room at Juilliard with Jasmine and about 50 other nervous families. Aria was somewhere inside the building, playing for a panel of judges who would determine whether she'd be admitted to one of the most prestigious music programs in the world. I was more nervous than I'd been during Darius's trial. This was it. This was what we'd fought for. This was the moment that would determine whether all the pain, all the struggle, all the money and tears and sleepless nights had been worth it. "She's going to be amazing," Jasmine said, but her leg was bouncing up and down. She was as nervous as I was. "I know she will," I said. "That child was born for this." 45 minutes later, Aria emerged from the audition room. Her face was unreadable. She walked toward us in silence, and my heart sank. Had it gone badly? Had the pressure been too much? Then she broke into the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "They loved it. They said my tone was exceptional and my emotional interpretation was beyond my years." One of the judges actually teared up during my Bach piece. We both jumped up and hugged her, causing several other families to look over at the commotion. I didn't care. My granddaughter had just conquered her demons and shown those judges what she was capable of. "When do you find out if you're accepted?" Jasmine asked. "They said decisions come out in 3 months. But Grandma," one of the judges pulled me aside after and said I should definitely expect good news. She said I had something special. "Because you do have something special," I said. "You have talent, you have heart, and you have the strength of every ancestor who came before you flowing through your veins." On the train ride back to Chicago, Aria fell asleep with her head on my shoulder, the violin case clutched in her arms. I looked at my granddaughter, this beautiful, talented, resilient young woman who'd been to hell and back before her 17th birthday, and I felt overwhelming pride. 3 months later, the acceptance letter came. Aria got into Juilliard with a partial scholarship. Between the scholarship, grants, and the remaining GoFundMe money that generous donors had told us to keep for her education, we could make it work. The day before Aria left for New York, we had a family gathering at my house. The violin sat on the coffee table, and I told Aria the full story of its history. Stories about Esther, May playing in secret. Stories about my mother Catherine keeping our spirits up during the Depression. Stories about every woman in our family who'd played that instrument and passed it down. This violin has seen things we can't imagine. I told her. It's been played in joy and in sorrow. It's been hidden, protected, stolen, and recovered. And now it's going to Juilliard with you. When you play, you're not just playing for yourself. You're playing for every ancestor who dreamed of a day when a black girl could walk into any concert hall in America and be celebrated for her talent. "I won't let you down, Grandma," Arya said. "Baby girl, you could never let me down. You've already made me prouder than you can possibly know." It's been 1 year since Darius stole that violin. 1 year since our family was torn apart by betrayal. Arya is thriving at Juilliard. She calls me every Sunday to tell me about her classes, her performances, her new friends. She's even started teaching violin to underprivileged kids in Harlem on weekends, passing on the legacy of music and resilience. Jasmine finalized her divorce and is rebuilding her life. She's dating again, carefully with appropriate skepticism, but she's happy. She's healing. Darius is in prison. He sends letters, sometimes, asking for forgiveness. Jasmine throws them away without reading them. Arya asked me once if she should respond to him. I told her that forgiveness is personal, but she doesn't owe anyone her peace. Some betrayals are too deep to forgive, and that's okay. As for me, I'm 74 now. My arthritis is worse. I move slower, but I wake up every morning knowing I fought for my family and won. I wake up knowing that when my time comes, that violin will still be in our family, still carrying our history, still telling our story. I started by telling you that if you're facing betrayal, if someone has stolen from you, if you're up against powerful people who think they can use the law and money to crush you, don't give up. Fight. Fight with everything you have. Use every resource. Tell your story. Make noise. Refuse to be silenced. If you're still watching, I want you to do something for me. Hit that like button. Subscribe to Vintage Vengeance. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because there are thousands of families out there facing their own battles, their own betrayals, their own seemingly impossible fights. They need to know they're not alone. They need to know it's possible to win. They need to know that legacy matters, that family matters, that some things are worth fighting for no matter how long it takes or how much it costs. My name is Dorothy Johnson. I'm a grandmother, a fighter, and living proof that you should never underestimate an elderly black woman who's protecting her family. Thank you for watching. Thank you to everyone who supported us. And remember, when they try to steal your joy, your history, your future, you fight back with everything you've got. Because we are our ancestors' wildest dreams. And nobody, not con men, not wealthy collectors, not broken systems, gets to steal that from us. Until next time, this is Vintage Vengeance, reminding you that the fight isn't over until we say it's over. And we don't give up. Ever. If this story touched your heart, if it made you angry, if it gave you hope, I need you to do 3 things right now. First, tap that subscribe button and turn on all notifications because I'm just getting started. Every day, I'm bringing you more stories of elderly folks getting revenge on the people who wronged them. You do not want to miss what's coming next. Second, hit that like button and leave a comment telling me what you would have done in my situation. Would you have fought like I did? Would you have given up? Would you have done something different? I read every single comment, and I want to hear from you. Third, share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Someone who's fighting their own battle. Someone who needs to know that justice is possible if you refuse to quit. This is Dorothy Johnson signing off. Remember, they can steal your possessions, but they can never steal your spirit unless you let them. Stay strong. Stay fighting. And I'll see you in the next video where I'm exposing another family betrayal that'll make your blood boil.